welcome to this edition of Africa This Week, your wrap of what's happened across the continent. I'm Demisho Greater. In this special edition of Africa This Week, we bring you some of the key interviews from the 11th meeting of Meetings Africa Trade Show. This took place in Johannesburg, South Africa. The business events industry cuts across the meetings, incentives, conferences and event sectors. Now, under this year's theme of Advancing Africa Together, this was an opportunity designed to contribute to the growth of Africa's potential as the world's fastest growing and most sought after business events destination. CNBC Africa spoke to the South African Minister of Tourism, Derek Hanekom, on how Africa can position itself as an attractive investment brand.
A lot is about perception and a lot is about branding. You know, how you brand your country and whether that branding has the necessary effect. But it's also about reality. So the one way that you can dispel perceptions or correct perceptions is if in the living experience, in the actual experience, you offer something that, you know, exceeded all expectations, that start defeating what might be negative perceptions. And in particular in the world in which I speak to you and you can show it to millions of people instantly, people are taking photographs, Instagrams, they're doing Facebook messages at events like this, at the many conferences that emanate from an event like this. And the delegates today at these conferences are sending positive messages around instantly. And so you change perception. The first thing, I think the critical ingredient for us in South Africa to change perception is to bring people here. That is our experience. People who come to South Africa to attend a conference or for a holiday go back from South Africa, and this is based on our research, with a much better opinion of South Africa than when they came here in the first place.
You said based on your research, what has research shown you about the movement of people in and out of South Africa?
Okay, well that is very well researched, and so we track, especially through Stats South Africa, Stats SA, we track visitor movements, and we disaggregate, and so we know who are the tourists and who are people that are here for other reasons, and we know from which markets they come. So we analyze our tourism inflow all the time, so that we know, what the trend is, what's happening. Obviously, additional research would tell you about the quality of the experience, but the actual visitor number, the tourism statistics are very accurate. So what it tells us is that in the last 2 decades, or rather since 1994, tourism in South Africa has grown quite astronomically. So in 1994, we had about 4,000 visitors to South Africa, or rather 4 million visitors to South Africa. In 2014, we had over 9 million visits to South Africa. So it's more than doubled over that period. And it continues to grow. However, we do know when there are setbacks because we need to analyze them. 2015, even the second half of 2014, we saw a decline in numbers for the first time in a long time. And in 2015 was not a good year. And there are 2 major contributing factors. The biggest one was probably Ebola. It affected some markets more than other markets, but also some of our somewhat onerous visa requirements did impact as well. And so, some of this is measured in actual numbers of people who come here, and some of it will be feedback from tour operators. And the tour operators would say, well, our biggest challenge is that people are finding it difficult to get visas to come to South Africa. Or from other markets, they would say, as much as people want to come to South Africa, right now they're nervous because of Ebola. Unfair perception. What's the perception? South Africa and the rest of Africa are just one. The fact that we didn't have a single Ebola case in South Africa, not known, which means you constantly have to change perceptions. But perceptions are a reality. But that's the kind of research we do. What we know now, because we're getting the results for November, December 2015, that we're back on an upward trend, which is very good news. We get from the industry some feedback on their forward bookings for 2016, which is very much affected by the favorable exchange rate, if you like. I say favorable for incoming tourists. It makes it a good value for money destination. So we're seeing very, very good forward bookings for 2016. So we're very confident with the Ebola factor being behind us, with us increasingly getting around some of the visa challenges, and now with the exchange rate, that 2016 is going to be a really good year for tourism.
Before we get to some of the positives, obviously you're talking about the tourism numbers being on the up and up. We've got the exchange rate that is working to our favor. How much closer are we to having a single visa where we are able to move between different African countries and we won't have this red tape, so to speak?
Well, if we look at the global trend, I mean, the visa requirements are being relaxed globally, but it doesn't mean that countries don't require visas from other countries. But the general trend is to have more countries visa exempt, and that's been the trend for the last few years. In tourism, obviously internationally, we encourage ease of travel, ease of access to a country. Every country will do what is necessary to protect its interests. So we South Africans need a visa to travel to the USA, to the UK, Germany, etc. They in fact don't need visas to come to us. But in certain other cases, countries do need visas to come to us. And there might be all sorts of reasons for that. So the first challenge, I suppose, is to constantly re-examine that. The Department of Home Affairs announced recently that it will be looking at, in the course of this year, the possibility of a visa exemption for the BRICS partner countries. That would mean that they would not need visas, but that's being considered. But for the moment, the immediate challenge is that where visas are required, to make it as easy as possible for them to get those visas. And that's where we've made some good progress. In China, for example, which is a geographically large country, for a Chinese traveler wanting to come to South Africa, needing to apply in person at the embassy or consulate or even at a visa facilitation center somewhere, it might be a 3-hour flight to go in person to apply for your visa. And that is what was required in 2015, and that is what is no longer required. So those Chinese travelers, and we're seeing a huge upward trend in visitors from China, those Chinese travelers can now go through a travel agent, and the travel agent can apply for the visa on behalf of the client.
Obviously, a very big thing here is the collaboration in terms of policies that are put in place, but also with your partners. So making sure that, in terms of routes, making sure that you've got airlines that are able to fly to specific destinations. What is the collaboration like? Because looking at South African tourism, there are different partnerships that are taking place. Just give us a sense of how that is panning out.
Well, let's just touch on the air connectivity part of it. I think that is absolutely critical, because one part of ease of travel and ease of access would be the visa requirements, if you like, but the other part of it is the connectivity and the airline routes that are available. Because if you have to take 2 or 3 flights to get to a country, it takes a long time, it's expensive. So the more sort of direct routes there are to South Africa, the better. From our point of view, we have our national carrier, of course. But the national carrier will not be able to put on direct routes from every country. So every and any airline that opens a direct route to South Africa, we welcome. And we're seeing increased numbers of direct routes. Most recently, Air China announced a direct route from Beijing to Johannesburg, which is good news. We're seeing Emirates and Etihad and various airlines putting on increasing numbers of flights to South Africa. So that air connectivity is critically important. In Africa, by the way, and a lot of this event is about Africa, it's a massive challenge. And it's the intra-African transport. To get from one African country to another African country, often it's a lot easier to travel to Europe than to a country that might be not that far from you, because the only way you can fly to that country is by flying to France or flying to London and then to the other country. So that becomes a collective African challenge, the aviation challenge, and strengthening connectivity on the African continent.
How are you dealing with these challenges to ensure that you're all moving towards the same goal what are you putting in place to make sure that no one gets left behind?
Well, we can't, as South Africa, put anything in place for Mozambique or for Zimbabwe, but we can help them market their products. We would like to believe that we're in this together, especially as a SADC region. But of course, there are countries here from Ethiopia, Kenya, Egypt, who are not necessarily part of SADC. But we think regional offers are very enticing, precisely because we are a long-haul destination. It's a long way to fly to South Africa. It's a long way to get to Zimbabwe, to go to the Victoria Falls. The majority of people who want to see the Victoria Falls will want to take advantage of being in this part of the world and see more than the Victoria Falls. So the more visitors Zimbabwe can attract, the better it is for us. Similarly, the more visitors we can attract, the better it is for Zimbabwe, because at least a percentage of tourists to South Africa will consider going to Namibia, Botswana, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, Mozambique. So we gain from each other's successes and each other's strengths.
After the break, more stories making headlines this week. Stay tuned to CNBC Africa, first in business worldwide. Welcome back. You're still watching Africa This Week, and in this special edition we bring you some of the key interviews from the Meetings Africa 2016. South African Tourism Board says continental collaboration and partnerships in the tourism industry can contribute towards growing continental capacity and ultimately spearheading profound transformation in Africa. We spoke to Thebe Ikalafeng, who is the Deputy Chairman of the South African Tourism, for more insight.
Well, the primary purpose of Meetings Africa is obviously to promote the excellence of the meetings opportunities which are available in South Africa, the venues, the products. There's just the excellence of South Africa as a place to host meetings.
How are we faring if you look at where people come to do business or host their business events? Looking at South Africa versus the rest of the African continent, how are we doing?
Well, South Africa is the number one tourism country in the rest of the continent. And Meetings Africa has been going for 11 years. And in the 11 years today, we've got 15 African countries, fellow African countries here, and 41, and out of the over 200 exhibitors, 41 of them are from the rest of the continent. So we're doing very well, South Africa itself, as a venue for meetings, and we're doing very well as a continent in terms of driving tourism. If you look at the WTO statistics on tourism, Africa is certainly among the top 3 in attracting tourists from around the world.
What is the feedback that you've gotten from the exhibitors that come here, the buyers? It's been 11 years now. People have been coming. They engage in different networking activities. What exactly comes out from these meetings, though?
When they live here, they sign deals. When they live here, they get new partners, new partnerships, new people to do business with. They understand the type of the diversity of the products that are available in South Africa and the other 15 countries which are exhibiting here. People come here to do business. When they live here, an airline signs up a whole convention. When people live here, a hotel group signs up a whole people to stay here. When people live here, they get all the logistics of meetings. Business is done here.
You were recently in Egypt, and obviously you were looking at Egypt investing in the rest of Africa and Africa investing in Egypt. Just how high on the agenda was investment in Africa? Are we still seeing flows into South Africa?
When you look at Africa across board, investment in when you look at Africa cross-board, the GDP of Africa is among the highest. We're growing at 4%. If you look at the rest of the world, going in definitely in less numbers than that. If you look at, of course, we've had challenging times from the economy globally, and of course locally, where the economy is all growing only at about 1% or predicted to grow at about 0.7%. So of course we're experiencing a few challenges, but we are doing the right things to ensure that the country, which traditionally has always attracted the highest FDI, in a continent will remain at the top of that pack. But of course, other markets, the Nigerias, the Kenyas, are giving South Africa a run for its money. And in Egypt, which is North Africa's biggest economy, when we're there on the weekend, part of what they're doing also is we also want a share of this investment to come to Egypt. So as a continent, the superpowers of the continent, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, are battling out for the largest share of FDI into their countries.
Siphiwe Ngwenya, who is the Chief Executive of the Gauteng Tourism Authority, spoke to us about the department's role in revitalizing the township economy.
The township economy is a very important element to us in transforming the Gauteng economy. I mean, the Gauteng on its own, as you look at it, it's like a city region under construction. If you go into Sandton, you go to Tshwane, you go to the West Rand and East Rand, everything is happening there around construction. However, the townships have always been used as a source of labor in supporting the growth of certain centers of the economy. So from the old part of what Gauteng used to be, which was called the PWV, Pretoria, West Rand, the Vaal, was what was anchoring the growth of the economy. Now, we would like to see townships as centers of the economy, and from the tourism perspective, we are saying that we want to transform certain parts of the township similar to what the Vilakazi Street is. We want to show best chefs in the township, want to show good bread and breakfast places in townships. We want also to see the art and the museum places that are there, because we do have professional artists, we do have streets that can tell a history about our country in terms of just traversing across that particular township. So the township economy, from a tourism perspective, need to have cycling in the township, need to have somewhere like if you go to Davidton, for example, you can tell a story about the vintage cars. You can tell a story about the chef, You go look for the oldest chef, like a chef Apache. It's one example of a chef that you don't find anywhere. It's got a history, it's got a story to tell around what evolved around the people, how did they get these chefs, and you can brand it as one of the areas similar to other countries where they brand their regions around that. So the townships has got so much to tell. You go to Mamelodi, which is jazz. In there, you've got jazz legends that are existing in Mamelodi that can tell a story about the township, and we can attract a lot of tourists in there. So in the nature of the transformation of the township, we are doing infrastructure part, and we have separated tourism in two forms. That we will deal with the marketing side of tourism in terms of marketing the areas, but there will be the side that deals with infrastructure and development, which is the one that focuses on the supply side of tourism, and we deal with the demand side of tourism. And therefore, on that demand side, which markets various important areas of the township, that's what we want to make it the new forte for people when they come into Gauteng. Sandton is not the only place. Eat in Sandton, shop in Sandton, but learn more about Ekasi, a township where you know the language, the culture, and the people.
Being here at Meetings Africa, there's been a huge focus on collaboration within the different regions, within the different countries. Being the city of Gauteng, how is collaboration going between you and other cities within South Africa?
Look, the whole notion of I have no malaria, you have malaria, therefore come to me, doesn't work, doesn't sell. We are one destination, we are one country. The collaboration between ourselves and other provinces is that in other areas they will have bigger game and game reserves that people would like to see, but people would like to shop in Gauteng. So the whole issue is around, if we have a tourist coming here for 7 days, in the 7 days, how do you make sure that in our collaboration, the person sleeps and shops and dine in this area, but also go and see some of the natural beauties that we cannot offer in our area and vicinity. And in that vicinity, they can also not offer the high scraper buildings as well as the city and the shopping and the leisure that is within the Johannesburg area, the Tshwane area, the Ekurhuleni area, the Sidibeng and the West Rand. So the cradle of humankind is one example. that we'll offer, which other places could not offer. So that collaboration of linking the sea and the inland and the bush, it's one thing that creates a whole package of collaboration that can make people say, we are coming to your destination to benefit this. Remember, when people travel all over the world, never will hear them, especially those that come out of Africa, saying, I'm going to Johannesburg only. They all say, I'm going to Africa. And when you say you're going to Africa, you as Africans is how you package that tourist in terms of giving the holistic offerings, and that requires collaboration.
The Seychelles Tourism Board broadened its presence in South Africa with an opening of an office in Johannesburg this week. This strategic move is aimed at maintaining a Seychelles tourism presence in the heart of South Africa. We spoke to the Chief Executive of the Seychelles Tourism Board, that is Shirin Naikin, on the mutual opportunities that can be derived from this partnership.
For us, South Africa is one of our very close collaborators in Africa, and we have very good relationship with the South Africa tourism, and we want to work together to promote not just us as a destination, but to promote Africa as a continent, because we believe there's a much bigger potential for the continent, because if we are able to attract more tourism to this part of the world, we as a destinations will definitely reap the benefit out of it. But for us opening our office in Johannesburg yesterday, it is more for us to be able to get a bigger share of the cakes. We know with the great collaboration with our South Africa Tourism, we can get twin destination packages where you get like South American visitors can come to South Africa for a few days, and they can jump off to Seychelles on their way back for a few days of the beach holiday as well. And also, in terms of, since we are in Meetings Africa, we know that we have the products now to attract business meetings in Seychelles, and we know we can definitely get a bigger share of this business. So this is why we are here today, to tell that we are ready. We have the facilities, the infrastructure in place, and we're ready. Now that next month we'll have a fourth frequency on the Seychelles-Joburg route. We connected to South Africa 3 times a week. As of next month, it will be 4 times a week, which will make it much more flexible, and definitely we will be within reach for business meetings, incentives groups and others.
Certainly good to see the collaboration between the two countries. You mentioned infrastructure, which is key. There are connecting flights between the Seychelles and South Africa. How important is the role of technology and how is that being used in tourism in order to attract investors into the tourism sector, not just in South Africa and the Seychelles, but of course Africa as a whole?
In today's world, technology is key, and for us, a greater part of our strategy has now moved digitally, online, because we realize, yes, the traditional form of marketing, it's still relevant, it's still important, but with the changing trend, most of our visitors now, they would look for information online, and we need to be present where they are looking for the information, obviously. And for us, being present on all the social medias, to be can be easily located on Google's in terms of search optimization. All these things are very important for us. In fact, we do have a team, an e-marketing team, which just look at the digital strategy, and we've been complimented as amongst the various African nations, we are amongst the most advanced actually in terms of our digital strategy in promoting the destination in Africa as well online. And this is where the business is coming from, so we need to be present there.
The High Commissioner of the Republic of Mozambique spoke to us about the collaborative efforts between South Africa and Mozambique.
The Mozambique have been, the government have been relying on the tourism as one of the sectors that can just contribute in the growing the economy. And a lot of things have been happening using the partnership with the private sector. If you can see, the government have been enabling the accessibilities. They have been building now the ring roads in Maputo City, and the private sector have been doing other kind of things which are revamping certain kind of hotels. We can mention Southern Sun, one of the stakeholders that is doing certain kind of expansion. We can mention also Radisson Blu also have been expanding also its capacity. We can even mention the conference center, which has been up to now being revamped, that probably in the end of October will be. You can see that there's huge investment going on and a lot of interest, and the MICE product has been put in place probably in Maputo.
You spoke about public and private partnerships. Obviously, we are also looking at partnerships between the different countries. Talk to us about the collaboration that's taking place between South Africa and Mozambique.
Yeah, basically there has been a certain kind of long cooperation going on. Mozambique and South Africa, they have been signing a memorandum of understanding for 95 on tourism. Normally there's certain kind of events going on. Yearly there's a launching of the season, which has been done by both ministers, where they are having a certain kind of show and highlighting things which is happening. We have also Easter route, which is normally happens every year, which includes KwaZulu-Natal, the province of Maputo, and the Swaziland, which is certain kind of cooperation has been taken for a long time. This is kind of cooperation related to investment and marketing, involving also the communities to be involved in this kind of process.
That's all for this week's edition of Africa This Week, but join us again next week for another roundup of what's making top stories in Africa. From myself, Demisha Greater, it's goodbye.